to talk about our efforts to understand our reservoir channel catfish populations. Okay, first of all, channel catfish in Ohio are a major component of the reservoir fisheries. A paper by Hutt et al. Found that catfish anglers in general prefer large fish and actually strongly avoid catching small fish. I think the term they used was that small fish had strong negative utility. Therefore, growth and size structure are very important to channel catfish management. In 2009, in Michaelet's paper, found that growth was highly density dependent, and that channel catfish density in reservoirs was highly variable and unpredictable. So, in Ohio, the way we have been managing channel catfish, we have been stocking small reservoirs heavily. The thought behind this is that there's little natural reproduction in these reservoirs. However, we have had little management to guide, or little information to guide this management. This is largely due to lacking an adequate sampling method. Therefore, there is a risk of overstocking, which could lead to high densities and slow growth, which would result in undesirable populations and inefficient use of our fish production. Recently, we did start using a hoop net method to sample these reservoir populations, which we did find was a valid index of channel catfish density, which I will be presenting a little later this morning. We have sampled 47 reservoirs from 2016 to 2018, and this really has provided new information that we can use to understand these channel catfish populations. So the objectives of this presentation, or of this analysis here, was to explain factors that influence channel catfish density, growth, and size structure in our reservoirs, and we want to use this information to improve our channel catfish populations and increase efficiency in the use of our valuable hatchery products. So, to do this, we used a modeling approach to explain density, channel catfish density. We used channel catfish hoop net catch per unit effort as our index of channel catfish density. And then for factors to explain channel catfish density, we used stocking, which was whether a reservoir was stocked or not. And this was included because obviously we would think that stocking should have an influence on density. We included reservoir surface area, which was the total surface area in hectares. The reasoning behind this was that we thought that larger reservoirs may have more resources available for fish populations. Reservoir productivity was included. We used chlorophyll A concentration as an index of productivity, and this is included because productivity is known to influence fish density. We also included largemouth bass density as an explanatory factor, which was electrofishing catch per unit effort from our long-term fisheries database. We included this because we thought, it's known that largemouth bass are an important predator of stock channel catfish in reservoirs. We also included interactions between stocking and reservoir surface area, stocking and largemouth bass density, and stocking and productivity. To explain channel catfish growth, we used mean length at age 7 as an index of growth. Explanatory factors were channel catfish density, which, as I just explained before, we used channel catfish hoop net catch per unit effort as an index. We included channel catfish density because it has been shown in the literature that growth declines as density increases. Reservoir productivity, again, was chlorophyll A concentration. Productivity is known to influence fish growth. Again, we included reservoir surface area as total surface area in hectares. Again, because larger reservoirs may have more resources for fish populations. We also included interactions between channel catfish density and productivity, and channel catfish density and surface area. Now, to explain size structure, we use channel catfish PSD as an index of size structure from our hoop net samples. Explanatory variables were channel catfish growth, which was the length at age 7. Obviously, faster growth increases the likelihood of individuals attaining larger size, and channel catfish mortality, which was total annual mortality estimated from catch curves from our hoop net samples, because obviously catfish need to survive long enough to attain a large size. So in our modeling approach, we used an information theoretic approach. For each of the response variables, we built a global model containing the variables that we thought would be important, which was, I just got done stepping through for each of these variables. We then fitted models with all combinations of these variables and retained the models within the delta AIC of 2. And we averaged parameter estimates across the models that were retained. So now let's look at the results of some of these of our models. All right, for our density model, these were the factors explaining density. All of these had a positive effect except largemouth bass density and the interaction with productivity and stocking. Most important factors were stocking and productivity. However, these models had a very poor fit. Really, these models did not explain much of the variability in density. So let's look at what our density data actually looked like. On the y-axis, we have our hoop net catch per unit effort, and on the x-axis, whether a reservoir was stocked or not. So I'm going to show you box plot, right? Box plots here. It looks like maybe there's a little more higher density in stocked reservoirs, but there's quite a bit of overlap. Now let's look at our growth model. These are explanatory variables. Again, they're all positive except the interactions. And the most important factors were reservoir surface area, channel catfish density, and the interaction between surface area and density. And these models explain the variability pretty well. So let's look at our length at age 7 on the y-axis and channel catfish catch per unit effort on the x-axis. This is all our reservoirs combined. It looks here like growth declines as density increases. However, the important thing here was the interaction between density and surface area. So I'm going to break this up looking at our reservoirs by break them up into small, medium, and large reservoirs. So first, our smaller reservoirs tend to about 100 hectares. Length at age 7 versus CPUE. Here's our data. This is how our model fit that data. Our medium reservoir is about 100 to 400 hectares. Here's our data, and this is how the model fit. And in our largest reservoirs are those over about 400 hectares. Our data and the model fit. So what we saw is that overall we saw slow growth in our small reservoirs, even when we had low density. However, in our large reservoirs, we had fast growth at low densities. The fastest growth was above about 50 fish per net set. So I'm showing with these reference lines right here. That's where about 50 fish per net set is. And at that density, we had a growth rate around 425. We had a length at age 7 of around 425 millimeters. So now let's look at our model explaining size structure. Here's our variables. Both of these had a positive effect on PSD. The most important variable, of course, was growth. And these did pretty well in explaining the variability in size structure. So let's look at our data with the fitted model. So on the y-axis we have PSD. On the x-axis we have length at age 7. These are our data, and this is the model fit. So let's look at, if you remember, at 50 fish per net set, we had a length at age 7 of around 425. So this is 425 millimeters, so that coincides with a PSD of just over 40. So in summary here, we saw that we had highly variable density that was largely unexplained by our models. We saw an important interaction, though, between density and surface area for explaining growth, where at small reservoirs we had slow growth. In larger reservoirs we did have fast growth and low density, while we had slow growth at higher density. We also saw that PSD increased with growth. So our management implications, let's go over that. Really what we see is that if we want to manage for fast growth and high PSD, we're most likely to achieve these objectives in the largest reservoirs, the ones larger than about 400 hectares. We also see that this is most likely achieved with densities of less than 50 fish per net set. So we see that managing density is critical to achieving these management objectives. However, the factors driving density are still unclear and really deserves more research. At this point, about all we can say is that when you have high density, the first obvious step you can take is reduce or stop stocking. And you can also loosen harvest restrictions. Some of the highest density populations we had were in large reservoirs that were not stocked. So we also see that our hoop net method provided quality data that we could use for management. So I'd like to acknowledge the division, Federal Aid and Sport Fish Restoration for funding, assistance from Ohio State's Aquatic Ecology Lab. I'll take any questions.
Time for questions?
We had a grad student of that technique for samples. We were reservoirs in Nebraska and found that, but she found that the sampling technique just had such high variance. That sets a catch feed effort might not be the best that they would use. It catches a lot of fish for size structure that maybe catch feed effort is a wild technique.
Yeah, we actually did validate that this method as an index of density. I'm going to be presenting that at 10:20 this morning, so you can come to that talk. Yeah.
Did you take into account, by chance, the abundance of shad when you're looking at growth rates and all that?
For this analysis, we didn't, but there's generally no shortage of shad in any Ohio reservoir.
You had coarse growth in large reservoirs. What do you call it large?
I had what? I had, yeah. In this case, large reservoirs was anything over about 400 hectares. Yeah.
Differences in angler exploitation. Generally, small reservoirs stock deck out on their main target, but usually larger fish that are maybe give us some insight on what you think that.
Yeah, so differences in exploitation have been proposed before to explain high variation in density in reservoir populations. I didn't show our mortality estimates here, but they were all very low. Like our mean mortality was, total annual mortality was around 15%, and nothing was higher than 25%. So we do have creel data. I don't know if it captures catfish data that well, but at this time we don't have any evidence that looks like there's really much exploitation in any of these reservoirs.
Any questions? All right, thank you.
Thanks.